This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
U.S. President Donald Trump to face senators after impeachment vote passes. At least 14 killed and 13 missing following Boko Haram attack in Chad. And Ethiopia to launch its first satellite into space. Hello and welcome to CGTN. This is Africa Live and I'm Karen Roberts in Nairobi. Also coming up in the programme. Increased threat of power outage in South Africa after fire strikes the second biggest power station. And Uganda set up showdown with Eritrea in the Sekafa Senior Challenge Cup. For the third time in U.S. history, a sitting president has been impeached. Donald Trump will be tried by senators after the House voted to impeach him. And while it's highly unlikely that he'll be removed from office, it was a pivotal moment and a story that has captivated the world, as Owen Fairclough reports.
This building has created moments of great political drama, but few quite like this.
Resolved that Donald John Trump, President of the United States, is impeached for high crimes and misdemeanors, and that the following articles of impeachment be exhibited to the United States Senate. Article 1, abuse of power. Article 2, obstruction of Congress.
Dominated by opposition Democrats, the House of Representatives passed both these articles of impeachment, and that means Trump will stand trial.
So far, we haven't seen anything that looks fair to us. So hopefully it will be fair, and when we see what that is, we'll send our manager. Well, again, we'll decide what that dynamic is, but we hope that the resolution of that process will be soon in the Senate. Let me tell you what I don't consider a fair trial. This is what I don't consider a fair trial. That Leader McConnell has stated that he's not an impartial juror, that he's going to take his cues, in quotes, from the White House, and he is working in total coordination with the White House counsel's office.
The president is accused of abuse of power for making vital military aid to Ukraine contingent on its government investigating Joe Biden, a frontrunner to stand against him in next year's election.
Gentleman is recognized.
And lawmakers allege he tried to block their inquiry by directing his staff and government agencies to defy subpoenas. For them, an obstruction of Congress. As the House prepared to vote, Trump flew to Michigan to rally his base. And there was clearly just one talking point.
It doesn't really feel like we're being impeached, do you? The country is doing better than ever before. We did nothing wrong. We did nothing wrong. And we have tremendous support in the Republican Party like we've never had before.
And Trump claims that in any case, he was acting in the interests of the US, not himself. Now a drama that's been followed across the world passes to the Senate, where a trial is expected in January. But with Republicans in control of that Senate, it's unlikely Democrats could muster enough votes to secure the two-thirds majority needed to convict and remove a president from office. Even so, for a man who talks often about making history, Trump has done it, becoming just the third US president in history to be impeached. Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Washington.
Well, the US president declared that he had tremendous support in the Republican Party following his impeachment vote. The historic vote split along party lines, much the way it has divided the nation.
I think we have a vote coming in. So we got every single Republican voted for us. Whoa. Whoa. Wow. Wow, almost 200. So we had 198, 229, 198. We didn't lose one Republican vote. And 3 Democrats voted for us, Haley. We have a great Republican Party, and we have to get that change. We have to take back the House. You'll have the greatest health care ever if we take, and by the way, we had another victory. The individual mandate, just a little while ago, came over the wires. It was just upheld.
Well, much of the world was focused on the impeachment process. Brooks Spector, former US diplomat and associate editor of the Daily Maverick, was among those who watched it and now gives us some perspectives from Johannesburg in South Africa. Thank you very much for joining us. Democrats proceeded with the vote knowing that Trump is unlikely to be forced out of office. Is this a case, would you say, of rule of law versus politics? And are there any lessons to be drawn from this, especially in Africa?
Well, good afternoon. I mean, let's be clear. The Democrats won the vote on the impeachment. It is not clear that they will gain the same edge in the Senate, although you are still going to see 1, 2, maybe 3 Senate Republicans who may wake up in the morning and decide the Constitution is more important than the president. I think the lesson that one needs to draw from this, of course, is that even more important than particular votes and victories, the Constitution and the rule of law must be upheld even when you go down to defeat. And of course, in politics, there's no final ending. There's always another vote. There's always another election. There's always another opportunity to reshape the narrative, to change the landscape. And that, of course, is what Democrats are going to hope for, because as we know, and as you've already explained, in 2020, that is just 2 weeks from now, they will start the campaign for the nomination for the presidency in the general election that shows up at the beginning of November. And Democrats will be, many of them will be trying very hard to gain that nomination. And it is likely that this issue becomes a key element in the discussion, both in the primaries as well as the general election. And I think also politicians will be very carefully watching how the polls and surveys begin to show, are voters shifting? Are they paying attention to these votes? Are they paying more attention to other things? And that's the nature of real politics in a real society where you have many different people and varied parties trying to gain control. The lesson for Africa, I think, is subtle, but it means that no one is above the law, even if the people trying to enforce that view do not always succeed. And it is better to go down into defeat than it is to have the warring parties literally warring in the streets.
Well, looking at this process then, would you say the US still retains some moral authority over other countries and how they conduct their politics?
Well, I mean, the Trump administration generally has had a bad influence, has had a negative influence on American prestige and credibility globally. That is without doubt. Although surveys will show you that there is a bifurcation, a division between how people think about the country and how people think about the president and his policies. And how people think about a country is reflective not only of the individuals in leadership positions, but also that full panoply of economic and soft power. One of the things that comes out of this particular process of the impeachment, it can do to some degree help to restore the idea that there are corrective measures even in dealing with a man as difficult to contain as Donald Trump.
And finally, Mr. Spector, will this impeachment have any implications, would you say, on current US-Africa policies?
Well, I mean, there are a couple of things. One is that general thing we've just been talking about, which is the influence of the idea of the importance and the primariness of rule of law. But the second, and I think it's I'm not quite sure whether this is a positive or a negative, but for the next little while, the focus of the Trump administration is almost certainly not going to be on looking at questions that relate to Africa. As you know, there is an ongoing dispute with China on a whole range of trade issues. There are arguments and discussions and not particularly pleasant debates with a number of traditional allies from Japan and South Korea and on through to the NATO nations about who pays what share and for what of the defense alliances. In all of that, perhaps it is good for Africa not to be involved in that discussion. The downside to this is, to the extent to which policy becomes more erratic and less predictable, that can have a less than effective impact on Africa, which is a continent in which the nations are enormously dependent on foreign assistance, direct investment by foreign corporations and other organizations, and of course the volume and nature of trade. To the extent to which the focus of the Trump administration is drawn away from those issues, that probably is a net negative for Africa, and I'm sad to say.
Okay, thank you very much for your analysis. That was Brooks Spector there, former US diplomat and associate editor of the Daily Maverick. Moving on to other news now, a Boko Haram attack has left at least 14 dead in Chad. It happened near to the fishing village of Kaiga. 13 remain missing and 5 were injured in the attack. Kaiga is located on the shores of Lake Chad and 35 miles away from northeast Nigeria. Boko Haram, launched in Nigeria's northeast, has been carrying out attacks since 2009. It's among the militant groups carrying out attacks in the Lake Chad, Sahel region. The attack comes as French President Emmanuel Macron visits West Africa this weekend. Macron is expected in Côte d'Ivoire on Friday and Saturday before heading to Niger, where he will pay homage to 71 soldiers massacred in a jihadist attack earlier this month. A rise in militant attacks has forced France to re-strategize its operations in the region. The attacks include another in Mali, where 13 French soldiers were killed. Well, Stefan de Vries is in Paris and he now joins us with more details on all of this. Stefan, was this trip already planned, or is it specifically in response to the 71 killed in Niger last week?
Well, a bit of both, actually. The trip to Côte d'Ivoire was already planned. It also contains cultural and economical elements, so it's almost a traditional visit by President Macron. It's already the third time at the end of the year that he visits Ivory Coast. He's also to meet the French troops who are stationed in the French base in Abidjan to have a Christmas dinner. So that was already planned, but he then adapted, of course, his itinerary to meet his counterpart in Niger on Sunday, President Issoufou. They will discuss the security situation in the region, also, but this visit will only last a couple of hours. So the trip to Niger is improvised, but the trip to Ivory Coast was already planned.
And Mr. Macron is expected to discuss plans for a summit in the southern French town of Pau on January the 13th. This will bring together presidents of the G5, that's Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali, Chad and Mauritania. The presidents just held a meeting earlier this week. What will be different this time?
Yeah. Well, the meeting on Sunday in Niger between Macron and the president of Niger is to prepare the meeting. Originally, the meeting was planned in the south of France 2 weeks ago, but then the attack in Niger on the soldiers took place, so it was postponed. But the 5 Sahel countries, they were not amused by the initiative of President Emmanuel Macron to more or less, invite them to France. It was seen as patronizing by the former colonial power. So President Macron will have to make sure that everybody's looking into the same direction again, that he's not seen as patronizing. So that's also part of this trip, of his trip to Africa this weekend.
And finally, Stefan, it looks like there's been an escalation in these attacks, even with French troops deployed in the region. Why is this, would you say?
Yes, absolutely. There is an increase in the last couple of months on military, but also on civilian targets by jihadists in the region. The problem is that the Sahel region is about the size of Europe, and in this area there are 4,500 soldiers deployed. So basically it's a big force, but relatively few compared to the size of the area that needs to be secured. There are also questions about the ability of the armies of Mali and Burkina Faso, whether they are able to fight the jihadists effectively. President Macron has his doubts. That's also one of the reasons he wants to organize the summit next month in France. But indeed, the situation is getting more and more complicated, and the 5 countries, the Sahel countries and France, they need to revise their strategy. So that's the goal of this summit. It is different from the summit of the 5 African presidents last weekend because they were basically talking about regional security implications, and now Emmanuel Macron wants to talk about the international forces, because it's not only France that's present in the region, but also smaller, lesser troops of the United Kingdom and Estonia, and other European countries are thinking of maybe sending more troops to the area as well. So it's a very complicated situation that indeed has got worse over the last couple of months.
Okay, thank you very much for that. That was Stefan de Vries there for us in Paris. A bill granting special status to Cameroon's Anglophone regions has been passed by lawmakers. The bill, passed on Wednesday, will now be presented before the Senate. If the Senate approves the devolution law and it comes into force, the Anglophone areas will be able to develop their own education and justice policies. Cameroon's English-speaking regions are in the northwest and the southwest provinces. They've been brought to a standstill by 3 years of conflict and cost about 3,000 lives. 500,000 have been forced to flee from their homes. The dispute had been simmering for decades, but boiled over in 2016 when teachers and lawyers started to protest against the use of French in schools and courts. Yang Jiechi, a member of the political bureau of the Communist Party of China's Central Committee, has met with Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni in Kampala. Yang said China is willing to work with Uganda to implement the important consensus reached by the 2 heads of state during the Beijing summit at the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. Yang, who is also the director of the Office of the Foreign Affairs Commission of the CPC Central Committee, said China is keen to deepen cooperation in economy and trade, production capacity and infrastructure. He also emphasized the need to strengthen exchanges on governance so as to enrich their relations. During the meeting, the 2 sides said that they will promote the synergy between the joint construction of the Belt and Road Initiative and Uganda's National Development Plan, Uganda Vision 2040. We are going to a short break now. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including newly elected Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboune to be sworn in, and Ethiopia to launch its first satellite into space.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Nigeria is my home. 160 million vibrant, ambitious individuals constantly seeking the perfect self-expression. It is these people who inspired me to be that person that is seen, to be a voice that is heard, and ultimately to be the anchor that I am. I have to tap in, tune in, and turn on the very best qualities within me to deliver the news. I'm Richard Nta, an anchor for CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Abdelmajid Tebboune is set to be sworn in as Algeria's new president this Thursday. Tebboune won a majority by 58.15% of the vote in last week's disputed election. He becomes the 8th president of the North African nation since independence. Tebboune says he's open to dialogue with the Hirak protest movement. Hirak had opposed the vote as one intended to keep the old ruling elite in power. The protesters have been staging numerous demonstrations across the capital, Algiers, demanding cancellation of the polls and also against the swearing-in ceremony. Sudan is marking a year since demonstrations over soaring bread prices began. Celebrations are set to take place across the country, marking the uprising that brought down veteran leader Omar al-Bashir. Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok will catch a train to the railway hub of Atbara, where demonstrations began. In the capital, Khartoum, celebrations are also planned at the city's Freedom Square, which was renamed in honour of the protesters. The day is being marked as the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, Fatou Bensouda, has called for prosecution of 5 suspects, including former President al-Bashir, without undue delay. The World Health Organization says the number of male smokers has declined for the first time ever. Global smoking trends have turned around, marking a shift in a global epidemic that has killed tens of millions of people. Governments' efforts to control tobacco have contributed to the downward trend. Africa has, however, witnessed a slow progress in tobacco prevalence.
For the first time ever, we have less men smoking. And this is so important to us because for the last 20 years, it was men smoking more. And we never saw a decline. We saw a decline in women smoking, but never for men.
The report shows that declines in tobacco use prevalence are slowest in 2 regions, the Eastern Mediterranean region and the African region. The Eastern Mediterranean region have many countries who are just beginning to work on tobacco control. And in Africa, it's a mix of countries who have worked on tobacco control for many years and are seeing good results, and countries who are just at the beginning of the tobacco epidemic and risk seeing a rising level of tobacco use if they don't put policies in urgently.
Ethiopia's first satellite, ETR-SS-1, heads into orbit on Friday. This remote sensing satellite is expected to be used for agriculture, predicting disasters and improving forest development, among other things. An Ethiopian delegation is already in China, from where the satellite will be launched. Talks have also been held with Chinese counterparts in Beijing for future negotiations. CT10's Gurum Chala reports.
ETR-SS-1 will soon join other satellites in orbit with an Ethiopian flag on it. Ethiopia's delegation, led by the Minister of Innovation and Technology, is already here in China to witness the launching of this historic satellite.
For me, it feels like the 1957, that the first ever object, man-made object, was put in place, and that Sputnik by the Russians in 1957. So for me now, I feel like that exactly. So this is the first ever Ethiopian object, Ethiopian satellite to be put in space.
Part of the delegation to China is also Ethiopia's head of Space Science and Technology Institute. He says the satellite to be launched will be highly instrumental for the country.
The purpose of ETR-SS-1 are 3 important purposes. The first one is really to introduce our engineers with a new technology and transfer knowledge and technology to Ethiopia. And the second one is building national image and showing Ethiopia is able to explore space. We have an instrument that can explore from the ground into space using the telescope. Now from space into the Earth. And the third one is, since our economy is mainly based on agriculture, then this remote sensing satellite is used to analyze and bringing the different images of the agriculture and water management system, mining system, and environmental monitoring.
This microsatellite is not only the first of its kind for the Eastern Africa state, but also an historic eye-opener for similar missions coming up. Ethiopia is already holding talks with Chinese counterparts for a 6,000 kilograms communications and broadcasting satellite launch as soon as possible.
The next milestone that we need to celebrate is a 6,000 kilogram first Ethiopian communication satellite to be put again in space at an altitude of more than 38,000 kilometers on the geostationary orbit, and that's going to happen in 3 years' time. So the feasibility study and other research studies have already been conducted, and what is remaining is the financing part of the project.
ETRSS-1, the multi-spectrum microsatellite, is also motivating Ethiopian authorities to foresee the training of locals as future deep space scientists. The plan here is to send Ethiopian astronauts to space in a decade or a decade and half time. Grumtara CGTN, Beijing, China.
Senegal's baobab trees are under threat due to deforestation. The tree holds deep cultural significance in many communities across Africa. CGTN's Astatal has more.
Baobab trees hold a deep cultural significance in Senegal. The trees are a key part of the ecosystem. They keep off soil erosion by keeping it humid and favoring nutrient recycling. But an increasing demand for cement and mining has put the baobab in danger.
The baobab tree is a truly cultural tree. It's a tree of civilization. With the baobab leaves, the Serer ethnic groups makes couscous. The bark of the baobab tree is used to treat certain diseases.
In the town of Banjai, white dust escapes out of quarries. Residents complain the quarries have increased air pollution.
Quarries cause dust by carrying sand to the population and not protecting them. At the very least, they should have put water in to keep the dust from rising. But they are being swallowed by mining.
The country's government has been pushing for the growth of local economies.
When we make a listing and declassify, we take the necessary measures to ensure that everything we lose in terms of the forest is made up for in another part of the land. The Senegalese state has committed itself through the emerging Senegal plan to make Senegal green.
Baobab trees can take around 15 to 20 years to fruit. Meanwhile, Ciment du Sahel, a major cement company operating in Banjia, has denied claims of harming locals. Astatal, CGTN.
In Kenya, the Nairobi River is choking. All of its streams are flowing in raw human, industrial and medical waste. However, a group of former criminals has taken on the task of cleaning up a section of the river. They're aiming to create a beautiful park to improve the quality of life for local people and to create jobs.
Kwa majina naitwa Frederick Okinda.
My name is Frederick Okinda. I am the chairman of Comb Green Solutions. Comb Green Solutions is a group of youth who used to engage in crime and girls who used to be sex workers. Ever since we came together, we stopped all those activities. It all started when this bridge was under construction. We asked the contractors to give us the job of watching over the construction materials.
The work went on well and the construction ended, but we feared that without work we'd fall back into crime. So we decided to start cleaning up our former hiding places. We decided to plant some grass and create a park.
Then we thought, if this whole place was now clean, how then could we let Nairobi River get so dirty? So we decided to intervene. We face a lot of challenges while cleaning up this river. We don't have the proper gear, we don't have the gloves, our gumboots are torn, and we don't have the waterproof overalls, yet we work here with women in this toxic water.
Tunafanya na wasichana. Na unajua hii maji imebeba sumu, ni toxic. Kwa saa hii kuna
Right now, we're in the county's payroll as casuals. From the little we get, we engage in table banking. Every Sunday, we each put aside 100 shillings, and we do this because we want to fight poverty. We also realize that when the neighborhood children were idle, they would play in the dirty river. We've created a playground now, and children enjoy themselves.
Say at least watoto wanaenjoy wanacheza. Pia at least tuna agenda ya
We plan to install Wi-Fi at the park and charge visitors a small fee, which we will then use to maintain the park.
Kidogo Wi-Fi wanalipisha pesa kidogo, alafu ndio tujue venye tunaweza maintain nazo hapa hivi kwa park.
The local community won't allow anyone to throw garbage or flying toilets in the river because their children spend their time here. They'll come for birthdays here and will provide security. We want to give back to the community.
It's now green and the environment is tidy, the air is clean, and we have clean water now.
Our project has transformed this area because the crime levels have fallen greatly.
All the business news coming up for you after the break, including increased threat of power outage in South Africa after fire strikes the second biggest power station. And Egypt launches its very own online trading platform called Safina.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
A fire has struck South Africa's second biggest power station, interrupting coal delivery to the 4,000 megawatt Majuba plant. The state power utility Eskom said the fire had been extinguished but had affected the conveyor belt at the rail offloading facility, so it would have to switch to road delivery of coal. It added that Majuba Power Station's coal stock is healthy, with more than 50 days' worth. Eskom has been beset by technical and financial difficulties that have caused rolling power blackouts across Africa's most industrialized nation this year. Last week, heavy rains partly shut down operations at its coal-fired Medupi plant, wiping thousands of megawatts of the grid and causing unprecedented levels of power cuts. China has announced the second set of goods from the United States to be excluded from additional tariffs as part of the Phase 1 trade deal with Washington. The Customs Tariff Commission of the State Council says the exemptions will be effective from December the 26th and will last a year. Beijing says tariffs that have already been levied will not be cancelled, but it says it will release further exemptions on a second round of tariffs in due course. Boeing will halt production of its best-selling jet in January. This has left suppliers of the Boeing 737 MAX 8 jet concerned about the future of their jobs. Boeing had hoped that the Federal Aviation Administration would recertify the aircraft grounded after 2 deadly crashes by the end of the year. But when it became clear that recertification and the lifting of the grounding order could still be months away, Boeing announced that they would stop production. The 12,000 workers that produce the aircraft, however, have been moved to other Boeing manufacturing plants. For workers on the 737 MAX 8 production line at Boeing Renton plant, the news came as a relief just before Christmas.
I think it was the right decision Boeing made to maintain our workforce during this temporary production stoppage. The reality is that it's important to maintain our workforce so that when the grounding is lifted, that we're able to ramp up production, build a safe aircraft, meet the needs of the customers with the 737 MAX going forward.
Well, there's obviously still uncertainty because what Boeing said was they aren't going to furlough, quote, at this time, unquote. So how long does that mean? Obviously, Boeing maintaining the employee payroll at this point before the holidays is a real relief, and committing to pay the bonuses that were earned is a real relief to the employees. But what does the end of at this time look like? We just don't know.
Kenya's Barclays Bank has started to change the look and the feel of its branches ahead of the full transition to the Absa Group brand next year. This move is a result of a decision by the UK-based parent firm Barclays to reduce its stake in the African business. 15 branches in Kenya's capital have already switched to the new brand colours. The group plans to have switched over at least half of the branches by the end of 2020. Although some of the branches are starting to look like Absa, the bank will continue to be known as Barclays until the process is concluded. So far, the transition has cost the institution a little over $9 million. Ghana, like many other African countries, is grappling with a plastic waste crisis. The country has yet to ban single-use plastic products, but efforts are underway to address the problem. CG10's Nabil Ahmed Rufai reports now from Accra.
Plastic pollution on Accra Beach. According to the United Nations, Ghana produces 1.7 million tons of plastic waste annually. Only 2% of it is recycled, meaning that a lot ends up in the environment. Senna MFA Zaglo started producing handmade paper bags last year to tackle plastic pollution in Ghana.
We buy food a lot by the roadside, and a lot of these food vendors prefer to use rubber bags or polythene bags because it's quite cheaper. And that is one of the reasons why there are a lot of rubber bags around.
Senna MFA says plastic bags are becoming unpopular due to the dangers they cause to the environment and aquatic life. However, many Ghanaians are yet to wholly embrace paper bags for their shopping.
Paper bags are a bit expensive as compared to polythene bags, so it's gradual. They are not embracing it altogether.
These paper bags cost between 35 cents and $1.20. Senna MFA Azaglo produces 200 paper bags a day. She hopes to get that daily number up to 1,000 as the business expands. But some environmental experts say switching to paper bags may not entirely solve Ghana's plastic pollution.
When it comes to paper bags or alternatives to plastic bags, I believe that there is no one-size-fits-all solution. So the idea is to first of all refuse to take the plastic. So if you go out there to buy something, try and refuse taking plastic bags. Now if you can't refuse the plastic bag, then you need to reduce how much of it you take. In as much as possible, you want to reuse what you have already taken.
Over 15 African countries have either banned or taxed the use of plastic shopping bags. But Ghana's government says it has no plans to ban plastics due to its contribution to the economy. Senna MFA Zaglo, however, hopes when the government bans plastics, the mass production of paper bags will help bridge the economic gap. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
Inspired by the success China's Alibaba has made, Egypt has launched its own version, Safina, which means ship. The platform is Egypt's take on marketing its local products worldwide. It offers a wide variety of plastic and metal products, as well as popular Egyptian exports like furniture and handmade carpets. Here's Adel El Mahrouki with more.
Earlier this year, a group of young Egyptians established a startup to market Egyptian products online. Inspired by Chinese giant Alibaba, they hope they too can help their country's economy grow.
We have seen how Alibaba transformed small and medium enterprises and the reflection it had on China's economy. We have many industries in Egypt which no one knows about, but then we find Egyptian traders going to import similar products. Foreign merchants do not know Egypt has these products and would go elsewhere to buy them.
But since they launched their website in March, after 9 months of operation, they say they have only put 50 producers online, while they've signed agreements with more than 200.
In Egypt, we have a problem with the data. Many got excited to join us, but then we see them sending us mobile pictures of their products, which is not the image we want for Safina. We were forced to get the tools to professionally picture these products and still do it for free to accelerate the data collection.
It may be a slow start for a big dream. Safina founders believe they have a great potential to grow.
Egypt is at the center of the trade world. We are a hub. Instead of importing all the way from the extreme east or west, why not save time and cost and import the same products from Egypt? Our industrial sector can cover that demand.
The website is also targeting Egyptian importers. They hope that having a wider variety of Egyptian products online would encourage local importers to purchase their goods domestically. Adil Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
We are going to a short break. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including artists in Ghana celebrate the Year of Return with an exhibition.
Join us from Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
To Ghana now, where artists are celebrating the country's Year of Return with an exhibition. It aims to encourage Africans from the diaspora to return home. The Year of Return is part of Ghana's commemoration of the transatlantic slave trade. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai reports now from Accra.
Ghanaian artist Nana Opoku is at the Year of Return art exhibition in Accra, showcasing his artworks. He hopes to connect with Africans from the diaspora through his pieces.
Life is more limitless than we make it seem. We try to box things and categorize things, and these people are this way and that way. My work is sort of looking at or exploring ways to break those illusions.
This art exhibition themed Diaspora, from local to foreign, is part of Ghana's Year of Return event, which marks 400 years since the first Africans were shipped off the coast of Ghana to Jamestown, Virginia, in the USA. 5 artists are taking part in the exhibition.
I believe life is not perfect, so I don't see why I should draw perfect forms. That's why even with the images, you can see they're not proportional. Yeah. And also, I want these images to become metaphors of people's sentiment, because people are going through a lot.
The exhibition is to last throughout this month, targeting people from the diaspora visiting Ghana. Ghana's Year of Return has so far brought over 200,000 people from the diaspora to Ghana since January. Through this art exhibition, artists here hope to unite Africans. Organizers of the exhibition want to use this platform to also project Ghanaian artists.
What you hear about African art when you are away and what you discover when you're on the ground is totally different. So there's a need for us who have African roots to know about our African history, about our, even not only history, what's happening today.
For me, it's paramount that as Africans, as people in the diaspora, we come together if we're ever going to make the kind of progress that our Pan-African leaders and forefathers have kind of set out to do.
Nana Opoku and the other artists here say they are not only hoping to project their works to a wide audience, but also want to use art as a tool to tell the history of Ghana. They believe through art, the message of encouraging Africans to return to their roots can best be told. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
All the sport coming up for you after the break, including Uganda set up showdown with Eritrea in the Sekafa Senior Challenge Cup.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
To football news, Uganda Cranes will face Eritrea in the final of the 2019 Sekafa Senior Challenge Cup at the Lugogo Stadium in Kampala on Thursday after victories in the semis. Eritrea produced the biggest tournament shock when they stunned holders Kenya by 4-1 with a brace from Abel Solomon Okbe and further strikes from Michael Habte Gebret Miskel and Robel Kidane to book a ticket to their first ever final. Uganda edged Tanzania 1-0 in the other semi, where Fayed Bayo scored the winner with a header. Kenya and Tanzania will vie for bronze in the third place playoff before the final at the same venue.
We want to win, but it's not just me. Everyone talks about how Uganda have, had a successful history in the region, but that's not these boys in the dressing room. Only one of these boys in Mutiaba has picked up the Sekafa Cup before. So you've got 19 young guys in there who've never picked up a trophy for their national team. You've got a number of guys who, up until 2 weeks ago, had never played for their national team. So it's not just me who wants to win and be successful. Everyone does. And actually, what a great start for some of these young guys if we can do that. But as you saw today in the first game, we face a very difficult opponent in a couple of days' time.
We all know that the competition does not end here. It's called the third place playoff, and Kenya will also be up for the challenge. We are not going to be complacent just because they lost the semis by 4 goals. Tanzania and Kenya always have exciting and competitive games, so we are preparing well. We know it will not be an easy game because both teams want to finish third.
20-time Grand Slam winner Roger Federer says that he is looking forward to his first ever competitive match on the African continent as he gears up to face long-term rival Rafael Nadal for a charity exhibition match in Cape Town. Despite spending several family holidays in the Rainbow Nation, the birthplace of his mother, the 38-year-old has never been in action on the continent. The match will take place in February next year, and tickets to the event sold out within minutes of going on sale.
I mean, I've said, well, it's not possible that I'm on the tour for 20 years, I become the players that I have been, and I've never played in South Africa. It's just not okay, I couldn't live with myself if that happened. And that's why I've been pushing very hard with the team, and just with my own schedule, trying to make it work. We almost had it last year from today, but then Rafa's schedule didn't allow it, and I've been kept on, you know, because I called him up and says, could you help me with South African EXO, because it would be a dream come true for me. It would mean the world to me. And I honestly said, like, it doesn't matter if it's 5,000 people, it's a big stadium, if it's wherever it is, I just want to and have to play in South Africa for my personal feeling, but also for the people and my fans, because I know in South Africa a lot of people watch tennis, or in Africa in general with super sports and all that. They watch a ton of sports, but also tennis, and they know about my connection, you know, to South Africa and everything through my mom. And Rafa was like, yeah, whatever, you tell me what, and we'll figure out a date. And it took a while, no problem, you know, it's just not so easy with both of us.
Senegal's capital Dakar recently held the very first edition of the Savate Boxing World Championships on African soil, bringing together fighters from 8 African and European nations. Mahia Mutua has more on the growing combat sports showcase event.
The very first edition of the international tournament in Africa got underway with fighters from France, Georgia, Russia, Portugal, Mali, Algeria, Italy, and the host nation in attendance. First up, 4 successive fights from local amateur boys and girls in the 65 to 80 kilogram categories before professional fighters in the French World Boxing Championship went head-to-head in the under 75 and 80 kilogram categories with world title belts on the line.
This win is a great pleasure. We did a great job, and it is a great pride to win a final for Mali and especially on the African continent. It was really necessary, and I hope that this victory will encourage and inspire other young Africans. I was a world champion, and the next goal is to qualify for the next Olympic Games.
I'm really happy. The fight didn't go the way I wanted it to, but I was able to do what I needed to. And I'm even happier than the first time. I am very happy. I have won a belt in Africa for the first time, and I'll try to keep this title.
I'm very happy to have won because I had promised it to my coaches. This fight was a confirmation for me because the last time I fought, I also claimed victory. I want to be a future Olympic champion and why not a world champion in Savate boxing.
The evening's action was broken down into 2 variations of the sport: French Savate boxing, traditionally from France, and Savate Pro, which has many similarities with Kung Fu. Bouts see 2 fighters equipped with gloves meet in the ring and engage in combat through punches and kicks. Fighters have 3 to 5 rounds to win the match, with points awarded for technique and effectiveness of blows. The international body of the sport, meanwhile, gave its seal of approval of the event.
Everything has been properly organized, the ring is perfect, there is a good public and a lot of atmosphere, so yes, we're very happy for that.
Many turned out to watch the event, especially Russian citizens living in Senegal, who were largely impressed with the level of fighting on display.
It is very nice to follow these fights. It means that Africa is ready to host international meetings such as this one and the 2022 Youth Olympic Games.
All the fights were at a very high level. I really enjoyed them, especially the fighters from Russia, France, Mali, and Senegal, who were at the very top. I congratulate all the fighters who put their hearts into it for the 3 to 5 rounds.
This is the first time I've come to watch fighting here. Personally, I had a lot of emotion supporting Russia. They did well, and congratulations to all.
The event, organized by the Senegalese and Malian Savate Boxing Federations and supported by the International Savate Federation, was aimed at promoting the burgeoning sport across Africa. Mahia Mutua, CGTN.
Let's head to Spain.